Welcome to part 2 of this installment of What's Eating Us with Maverick Citizen. Please do enjoy.
So I want to take it back to this point that was made about, community support and ask like a very kind of pointed question of, is there a stigma around breastfeeding? Is there shame around breastfeeding or not breastfeeding? And why is that, who's that aimed at and for what purposes? Chantell?
So in the HIV era, now we are long past the Tshwane Declaration of 2011, where women were given universal antiretroviral treatment. So as soon as you tested positive as a pregnant woman, you would get your ARVs, and it was lifelong to make breastfeeding safer. But before that time, the exclusive breastfeeding message was very much linked to an HIV text. If you were HIV positive, you had to exclusively breastfeed. That's where that word exclusive breastfeeding became announced because of HIV. Not saying that basically strongly before the onset of our PMTCT program, which came into existence in 2001. So we're talking about 22 years ago. Secondly, in terms of I want to say the ultra savvy mommy, the yummy mommy, this new concept is now moving towards having a lactation consultant, having a doula, having a sleep therapist. It's become very commercialized and I almost want to say modified. Now the stigma is, if you don't breastfeed, you're not a good mommy. Because it's almost an upswing. It went from no breastfeeding, now it's an upswing in breastfeeding. So secondly, I'm sorry, guys, I'm in a university, so there's some excitement in the hallway there. Okay. So what I wanted to say to you now, there's a lot of pressure on moms to breastfeed, but it's coming from mom groups. And we see that breastfeeding is increasing in the high-income groups. More high-income women are able to breastfeed. Why? They get maternity leave, they get the health support that we're talking about, to have a lactation consultant, to have a doula, to have a pediatrician who is pro-breastfeeding. All seems to be associated with income, and that's the problem. Breastfeeding in previous research was shown to be, it's primitive, it's for the poor people, it's only for those people. But it's not. Now we've become very conscientized about the environment, eating green, slow food. Breastfeeding is now part of that conversation. It's natural. And I think what we are missing, Zukiswa, is the neglected middle. The working class woman who has to leave her child at 6 o'clock in the morning because she has to go and look for a piece job and she can't be home to be breastfeeding. She therefore has to settle on an alternative. And this is where the work that Phunyuka and the lactation fraternity is doing very well, is to support mothers to be actually able to support their supply so that they can express, they can store, they can stockpile, they can have the milk as a supply and continue their breastfeeding journey. That's where the stigma is coming from. The stigma is coming from, one, the HIV world, like I said, and then secondly, breastfeeding now is almost a superfood for the super supported, if that's why I can put it.
Yeah. What has been your observations, Phunyuka, as you've been doing your work on the stigma that's attached?
From my side, I work in, I would say, in the first world and the third world kind of a situation, because I do get to see mostly people who use private facilities, so they can afford and everything, and now they've got access to information and all that. So like Chantell has already said, there is this pro going green, eating clean and so forth. So they will do so much to try to breastfeed, and the mother who is struggling to breastfeed is seen as inadequate. And that also causes a lot of stress, because the first 3 days after delivery, that's where I see a lot of mothers. And believe me, my work during that time, it's not even about getting them to latch the baby correctly. The baby is latching, the production is good when I do the examination. My work there is actually to reassure them that you are enough, you are doing well. Like the first thing that the mother tells me when I get there is that I feel like I'm not good enough for my baby. I feel my body is failing me. You see, those are the kind of words that they use. And it's because of the pressure that they get from their environment, the community, the family, that if you are not going to breastfeed your baby, you are not doing correct, which is very wrong, because you're putting so much pressure on the mother. And like Chantell has already said, stress causes the milk to go down. If you are stressed, you're not going to be having enough supply because you are stressed. So we need to work on that stress level. On the other hand, I work with mothers who would say, I am not going to breastfeed because if I breastfeed, it means that the father is not going to buy formula for my baby. So they're going to be wasting the money. So it's another way of controlling the family economy. If I don't breastfeed, then he will have to send me money to buy formula milk, and from that money that he sends, I'll be able to buy other things as well. And then also with the community or the friends that they live around, if you are breastfeeding, it means that you are poor. We still have that kind of stigma in this side of the world, where if you are unable to buy formula for your baby, if you're unable to buy disposable diapers for your baby, you are regarded as poor, and people do not want to be seen as poor. So because of that, they would use formula feeding. Some of them would go even to the extent they want to breastfeed because they understand the benefits of breastfeeding. They breastfeed their babies when they're at home, but when they go out to their friends, when they go to the shops, when they go to the stock fields, then they go with a bottle of formula. So while I'm trying to work around that to say, instead of putting formula in the bottle, put your breast milk, because you want them to see that you are giving something that is not coming from your breast. Well, I still want to get the breast milk into the baby. So I try to work with what they have there.
Yeah, that's such an interesting observation also, especially since you're saying you're kind of straddling both worlds, that, there's people who still think, well, it's not something that's wholly acceptable in society. You don't want people to think you're poor. You don't want people to see you taking out your breast and feeding your child, even though it's the most natural thing to do. And, from a high income perspective, actually, it's the best thing to do. And as a result, you end up shaming other people who are not doing that. So it's so interesting. I also remember there was a video that was circulating social media last year where this woman was trying to breastfeed her child and was like literally chastised by one of the people in the restaurant for doing that. So it's kind of situations like that where, again, this issue of support and the community being able to accept and understand what is needed, and how not to make people feel bad about breastfeeding. So obviously there's some sort of shift that it seems needs to happen in our society. So I think I'm going to bring some of the audience questions in here so that they don't feel like we're ignoring them. I have a question here from Mbongeni Kumalo, and he says, some women in developed countries bottle and sell their breast milk for others to use. Does that pose a health risk at all? Let's have our lactation specialist answer this question.
Okay, witnessing. We do have the issues of donor breast milk. We also use donor breast milk here in South Africa. However, we need that milk to be treated. The health risk comes in. We do not know for sure that the person who is selling you that express breast milk is giving you only express breast milk. What kind of other diseases do they have that can be passed on from breast milk into your baby if you are not testing that milk? I'll give you an example with hepatitis C. It can be passed through breast milk. And then if we haven't tested this mother for those kind of diseases, then how sure are you that you are giving your baby safe milk? So while it is breast milk, it will always be superior to any other form of feeding to the baby. However, we need to do it in a safe way. where you're getting it in a reputable breast milk bank, where they would have done all the tests, and then they would have pasteurized that express breast milk to make sure that it doesn't pass any other diseases into your baby.
Okay. I'll move on to the next question. And I think, Chantell, maybe you can speak to this one. This question is from Nanette Jolly. Is anything happening to improve or introduce education of healthcare providers so that they don't sabotage breastfeeding with the best of intentions? They don't know that they don't know how to support it or help a mother without using formula. The WHO showed that SA doctors obtained the information about infant feeding from formula reps. Healthcare providers need at least some education in supporting breastfeeding. Providers are so terrified of making mothers feel guilty. Actually, mothers are being failed by the healthcare system, and the appropriate feeling is anger, frustration, grief. Most mothers want to breastfeed. We all want the best for our babies.
Absolutely. And thank you to Nan. I just want to also acknowledge Dr. Nan Jolly. She is a formidable breastfeeding advocate. We haven't really made good progress in terms of looking at the curriculum for the training of health professionals. We still need to do that piece of work. But as the WHO report, which included South Africa as a research country, showed, most of our health professionals are exposed to the infant formula companies in their student training. And that's why it's imperative for us to keep the regulations and make sure the regulations are being upheld. That's regulations R991. We that are working in the health or in the institutions, we have got a huge task to bring it to the attention of our superiors. And I'm talking about the leadership of the universities, medical schools, schools of public health, dietetic programs, nursing programs, doctors programs, physiotherapists, even dentists. All of these people engage with children and young children. We need to stop the formula industry from infiltrating. The question is, how do you do that if the pediatrician feels, when he calls the rep, who is also a health professional, that he's not doing anything wrong because, one, we have elevated them to be the generators of science. We see the infant formula companies have websites for professionals. Professionals think that the infant formula companies have cutting edge research. They even say they've got better research facilities than we do. So we go to them to get the answers. That is something we need to address in our institutions because it's a conflicted agenda. We're trying to promote breastfeeding. They're trying to sell product. How do you send the wolf to look after the sheep? We have to keep asking these questions to our colleagues because it is infiltrating the health system. As long as nurses are funded to go to conferences by formula companies, we have a problem. As long as you have materials being supplied, I went with my sister who recently had a baby at a very high level facility here in Johannesburg. We walk into the room and the mat that you welcome your people with, the first thing by the door is funded by an infant formula company. So from the time you get into the door, subliminal messaging all the way to where the scale is. The scale was also funded by a formula company. So I asked my sister, tell me, if she's breastfeeding, but if you had to recommend a formula, what would you do? Behold, she answers what she has just seen 5 times. And I asked her, why did you say? She said, I don't know, but that just came to mind. I said, no, there, from the door, right up to where your child was being weighed, you've been subliminally influenced. It's happening all the time. And that's why we need to call it out. And we need to be proactive about it and not reactive. Once a violation has happened, it has happened. Once the stockfile has been advertised, it has been advertised. So for us, it's about keeping the door closed on the formula companies, not to engage. And I'm very happy to say that a project that has been hosted by UWC is looking at this in terms of how formula industry is engaging with different sectors and what kind of counteractions should we be developing. And it's going to take whole of society. And I think that's where the media can be really formidable in trying to get the message out there.
Yeah, I mean, strangely enough, it seems as though the formula companies are the ones making the women feel supported, as opposed to their actual communities make women feel supported. And this insidious, ness of how it kind of works on your psyche subliminally. You're not even aware. You're just making choices, and choices that you're not even aware are not the best choices. But what I want to do is bring it back to the impact, right, of not getting the nutrition that children need and what that actually looks like. There's a comment here in the formula, in the chat box, that says formula is sweeter. So once they start formula, they don't want breast milk anymore. And I just, I want to kind of hear your thoughts and expand on, once children start to taste things that at an early stage, how that then impacts on their choices going forward, and how that manifests in their bodies and in their development. Can you speak to that, Phunyuka?
Okay, well, once they taste formula, of course, most of them do not want to go back to the breast. And one of the reasons, other than the taste, is also when you give formula, most mothers use bottles. And then with bottles, they're not going to use the muscles that they use when they are on the breast. So with that, most of it, like I would say, formula is kind of like in a bottle. It comes as an easy way out because it just falls into the mouth. All the baby needs to do is to swallow. Whereas when you put them on the breast, they need to engage. They need to use their muscles to pull the milk, like they're suckling on the breast to get the milk out. So I always ask mothers who come back to say that because I had to do this, I started giving the bottle. And then but when you came, we spoke about cup feeding to avoid such situations, because if you are given a choice to get paid while you're not working and working to get paid, we are all going to choose to get paid without working. So that is the choice that you have given the baby with that bottle of formula. So the other issue is in terms of their food preferences. I've already mentioned whatever you eat, the taste is passed on from your diet into the breast milk and then into your baby. So your baby gets exposed to different tastes. Whereas in formula is a standard taste throughout. There is nothing, no added flavors that are going to come in there that the baby will learn to eat other foods. And then this baby, when now you have to start introducing solids, they become picky eaters. They want to stay on the bottle, and then they're used to sweet things because your breast milk taste differs throughout the day. There are times where, because you've eaten something, your breast milk will taste a little bit bitter. You have come from an exercise, your breast milk is going to have a lot of lactic acid in there. It's going to be a little bit bitterish kind of taste. So because of that, the baby gets used to different tastes in their taste buds. But with formula, it was a standard taste of sweetness. And then we're surprised that we have babies who are prone to having a sweet tooth. And then there comes other issues, health issues related to our nutritional choices later on in life. The other thing that is a problem with the nutritional part of giving formula long term is that they do not self-regulate. When you give them a bottle, if you've prepared 250 mils of a bottle, you're going to give them that bottle. You're going to force feed them actually to finish that bottle because you put it in there until the baby has sucked it completely. On the breast, they're going to suckle until they feel full, and then they take themselves off the breast. As early as newborn, they're able to self-regulate, and then they learn to self-regulate. They know when they are satisfied, they're tired, they will stop feeding. But with formula, we teach the baby that you eat until you finish. And then that's where even portion control as they grow older is going to be a challenge because they've been taught to eat until you finish.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising 2 points that I think are very important. I would have never thought about the issue of muscle development, as being part of, stunting a child's development. It's not really something that's kind of top of mind. And I think it's an important point that you've made. But also this issue of overfeeding, that you're giving your child more than they should be eating, again, which is leading to this issue of malnutrition, because malnutrition is not just about undereating. You can be overeating and you're still malnourished, So I think that's such a good point that you're making. And I'm going to throw this to Chantell. Andrew Robinson is asking, does sugar addiction start with formula feeds?
An absolute yes. And I think we must start talking about formula as a ultra processed food. It is the first ultra processed food that we introduce to children. I'm very happy also that Dr. Robertson is online, because he's a proponent of diversified diets, plant diets. And as Phunyuka said, if we are continuously feeding our children a standardized sweetened food, they just move from 1 to number 4, from number 4 to noodles, from noodles to the biscuits. So that ultra-processed, call it a gradient, is introduced by the kinds of foods that we introduce earlier on, and that's formula. In the breast milk, the baby is getting the taste very different kinds of feed pattern to the way you have with the bottle feed. There was a question in there about nipple confusion. And it's true. The reason why babies get nipple confusion is not so much about the nipple and the teat, because the bottle teat, but it's actually about the rate of flow for the food. When you are on the bottle, usually the baby is lying on its back and the bottle is up. Gravity is pulling the food into the mouth and the child is just swallowing, not sucking, swallowing. And Phunyuka talked about self-regulation. So if you are just like an open hose pipe, the water's flowing, but you have to work for the food when you're breastfeeding, that's when the baby doesn't want to go back to the nipple because the nipple needs sucking. So that's that nipple confusion. And then I see there's a question about stunted, which is related to the kind of foods we serve our children and feed our children. Stunted just means that you are too short for your age. So in that sense, you are now a smaller version of yourself. So you are stunted. And it is actually an adaptation, because the calories are not enough to bone growth. That's where we need bone growth. The calories are not optimized for bone growth. There's not enough micronutrients. The food is too little. Therefore, the body actually conserves its energy and makes it smaller, because you need less. And when you need less, it also means the brain is not growing. So we now know that stunting is directly correlated with the physical size of the brain, but also the neurons in the brain are not well developed. The synapses for making memories and making learning happen is not well developed in the stunted child. So the stunted child's brain is a stunted brain. To go together, malnutrition in physical sense, but also in the brain sense. And South Africa has the highest stunting rates amongst the BRICS countries, the middle countries, Southern Africa. So we are not doing very well. And I personally believe it's because we're not also doing very well with our breastfeeding rates.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for picking up on the stunting question, because that was going to be a question that I was going to ask you now. But I want you to kind of take that a step further, Chantell. So yes, then you're not as big as you could have been physically, right? Your brain is not as developed as it should have or would have been. But what does that mean? What does that mean for the future of that child? Like, can you give us sort of a picture of how that manifests in our society when you are stunted? What is your future looking like?
Yeah, so what that manifests in is a global database of all the countries that actually have UN-supported data. So that data goes into a database. And we are not talking about one country. We're talking about hundreds of countries whose data is pulled together for us to make sense of how is this impacting children's lives in the future. So we know, one, if you are stunted, your brain and your cognitive development is not optimal. So for every centimeter of compromised growth, length growth, you have compromised IQ, which you have your lower IQ. And there's actually a guideline, which I don't have off the top of my head, but if I'm not incorrect. It's something for every centimeter of shortness, you actually have 4 points lower. So every centimeter of shortness, 4 points lower, which relates to your education ability, which means when you are supposed to be in grade 1 and learning grade 1, you are still actually struggling with grade RR. You're not able to keep up because your cognitive skills are stunted. When you're supposed to be doing matric, you are still in grade 8 and your cognitive skills are compromised. So that means you don't have very good education outcomes. The matric results are poor and pathetic. Then it also means that you can't get very good jobs because you don't have the education ability, the learning of skills. And these studies come from studies as simple, driven by production. They show that children who are stunted can't stand on one leg and pick up one arm. These are gross motor skills. And if you are compromised with that, that means you're not able to type as fast as on a computer, or you're not able when it comes to picking tea leaves in India. Some of the studies have been done with productivity. So you don't pick as much as somebody who's well, healthy, full stature. And what does this mean for the future? That means you don't get a good job, your earnings are compromised. So we also know that when you are stunted on a population level, you earn less. Less meaning money. So you are perpetually caught up in this cycle of poverty. So malnutrition is not just a biological issue, it's an economic development issue.
So we're left with a minute. Can I have some closing remarks from each of you? And just in terms of your closing remarks, if you can sort of think about how it is, in line with the theme of how mothers can make breastfeeding work while at work. Chantell?
So I would like to say that the work is not only just at work and talking about workplaces. All women are working. Even the women in the household are working, and it's unpaid work or unpaid chores. I would really like to appeal to everybody that was on this call to be a breastfeeding advocate. You can be a support when you see a mom who's breastfeeding. Give her a nod, give her a smile, give her a thumbs up, because we need to build this breastfeeding culture. And the second thing is, question your health professionals. You can ask your doctor, have you seen a rep in the last 30 days? Because it's going to influence what he tells you. Question your dietitian. Have you seen a rep in the last 30 days? And then make your decision. I think it's really important. And as we are getting access to information, digital, right to our phones, we need to be questioning, where is that information coming from? If the information is being perpetuated by the people trying to sell the product, it's probably not good information. So please be critical, even with your health professional.
Thanks, Chantell. Phunyuka?
Okay, my plea to the employers, wherever you are, if you're an employer, is to support your breastfeeding mothers in the workplace. Most South Africans are not aware of our policy that allows mothers to breastfeed while they're at the workplace, or to express while they're at the workplace, for at least 6 months now. I hope they're going to increase that eventually to go beyond 6 months. But let's make use of the breastfeeding policies that we have at the moment to support our breastfeeding mothers. And then I would appeal to everyone who is working with breastfeeding mothers to support them instead of making them feel bad. Because some mothers want to express, but then they're told, you're not going to put your breast milk in the fridge that we share with everybody else. The breast milk is in the container. They're not asking you to drink the milk. Please let them put it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to my guests, Chantell and Phunyuka. I think you had a lot of great information to share with our audience today, but also to help people feel supported. And with that, thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good day.
My name is Zukiswa Pikoli, and this has been another episode of What's Eating Us with Maverick Citizen.